on to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr.'s History Club. Black History Month presentation. We meet here every other Wednesday. Twice a month. Every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr., Dr. Professor Amos Wilson, Luis Reyes Rivera, Gil Noble, and all the historians, Ivan Van Sertima, Professor George Simmons, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Leola Maddox, and everybody that gave up fame and fortune. They gave up big lives, big money. They didn't have to do what they had, they didn't have to do what they did. They wanted to bring truth to power. They could have went the other way, but they didn't. So we meet here, we want to keep their name alive. That's why we have these lectures. Especially with Leola Maddox, used to drive an old car all the way from Patterson, New Jersey, to the United African Movement, because she believed in live lectures. And she would eat her dinner in there. So we keep the forum open. So I want to thank all y'all for coming. Now, Brother Roger, Keisha, Tad, and Nashe, Thorough Black Talk. Right on the side. Thorough Black Talk. That comes on 8 o'clock, Facebook Live. Also, on Saturdays, Blog Talk Radio, Sister Empress Chi. That comes on at 10:30. You put in Empress Chi and stroll down the New Day Resurrection at 10:30, and that's a very good program. Also, on Tuesdays at 5 o'clock, we have Manhattan Neighborhood Network with Brother Mike Graves, Julian Harper, and Noel Leader Community Cop. That comes on at Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Also, if you want to view all the past lectures of the William Mackey Jr.'s History Club Zoom audience, you can YouTube Brooklyn William Mackey Jr.'s History Club, and all our lectures will come up. Lectures that trusted in the past, and all the speakers we have, so you can do that. If you want to donate anything or help the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr.'s History Club, I have my Cash App in the chat. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we bring this brother in every February, and he has a dynamite study group on Saturday and on Fridays, African Echoes. He can tell you more about what he does as far as education and study. Without further ado, we're going to start off our Brooklyn Mackey Jr.'s Black History Month with our brother Truss Graham from African Echoes, and his topic is going to be slavery and the curse of Ham. Please give him a big hand, Brother Truss Graham.
Thank you, Brother Ray, and I want to thank the William Mackey, Brooklyn William Mackey Study Group for giving me this particular opportunity to be with you today. But before I get started, I like to do things usually in the protocol of tradition. And tradition, African cultural tradition, warrants that in order for me to speak to you, I have to get permission, because sometimes individuals don't have the right or the opportunity to be able to voice their particular opinions unless the right people give them the authority and the chance. And most of that is always done by the elders, because they are the last final say in regard to what goes on in the community. You have the elders, you have the ancestors, and then you have God. So I would ask anybody in the audience, the oldest person in the audience, for the permission to allow me to speak.
You may speak.
You may speak.
Thank you.
The oldest person.
That's right. Thank you, my dear. I appreciate that. She was making sure you didn't steal that thunder, you know what I mean? But I appreciate that, and it's always good to acknowledge the elders in the room and to maintain tradition and have some sense of continuity with our culture and to make sure that we follow through. First of all, I want to say happy African History and Culture Month. As you notice, I elongated it. I said African History and Culture. I didn't say African history because really African history, it ain't about just our history, it's about who we are as a people. And who we are as a people ain't always in the past. It's now, and it's gonna be tomorrow. So I think that we should literally rename the month to African History and Culture. African History and Culture. And the reason that is because it encompasses so much more, even though a lot of that is unknowingly applied. But when we specify it, we let people know that we're not just talking about the past, that we're talking about the current, and we're talking about whatever the future would be. And what that really represents is that we take time to be able to follow in the footsteps of those individuals that laid the groundwork for us to be here. So that's why it's important that not that we just remember the past, because remembering the past is, again, not enough. The most important thing about studying history is the lessons that we learn from them.
You're muted, we can't hear you.
And those lessons can only, be absorbed and revealed through a process of research and study. In other words, the very nature of being able to consume information is not just reading. You can't just read anything and assume that you're going to get it. That's not how it works. Most scientists know that there's a research methodology and process that you use in order to consume information. So these are the things we want to try to share with you, and that's what we do in our study groups, and that's what we do in our forums, because as you do know, going to a lecture, again, is not enough. You can't just sit down and listen to an individual and go away and think you got it. That's not how it works. And the process is that most of the time, those were actually introductions. They were primers for us to be able to follow through with a process of research and study and to literally elevate and to broaden our scope and understanding about the subject matter. So when Dr. Ben and them would give us lectures about various subject matters, those subject matters, even though in certain counts they were somewhat detailed, but not detailed enough to really understand the nooks and crannies of what it meant to absorb the whole essence of what these people are about. And I'm not just talking about whether it's the ancient Kemites or the Hutu or the Batwa or whatever group that you decided to target or to research, that we use the proper procedures and methodologies in order to consume that information. So that's what it is. But as we get started, I just want to reflect a little bit on the last time that I was here. And as y'all do know, the last time I was here, which was last African History Month, we dealt with some of the greatest scholars of African, history experience. And the reason that I did that was to give you acclimated and to become familiar with some of the greatest, African scholars that laid the foundation. And mind you, at that particular presentation, I only talked about 4 or 5 scholars. And they're very prominent scholars, But I also wanted you to go back and look up and to do research, follow-up background for some of those individuals. But one of the things that I do know, and that's why a lot of times I always bring reference material with me, is to make sure that you get the reference so that you can look up the material. And last time that I was here, the scholars that I dealt with was Chancellor Williams. We dealt with Chancellor Williams. We dealt with Leo Hansberry, you know, one of the greatest, you know, minds of the 20th century. Those that don't know, Leo Hansberry was the uncle of Lorraine Hansberry. You know, as y'all do know, one of the greatest, you know, actors that ever lived, just, you know, made his transition to the ancestral realm, Sidney Poitier. Well, Sidney Poitier literally made his claim to fame in a play called Raisin in the Sun. Anybody know who played the son of, I knew he would know, who played the son of Sidney Poitier in Raisin in the Sun? Tell him.
Glenn Turner.
I ain't asked you, the man raised his hand. You just stole a man thunder there.
I know some shit too, man.
That is correct. It was Glenn Turman. And, you know, for those that don't know, Glenn Turman, you know, Cooley High, also was married to Aretha Franklin. And, I mean, he's just a plethora of so many, you know, outstanding works that he contributed to. But one of the things that's important is that these individuals have to be underscored and highlighted, because a lot of times, you know, they go, you know, into the dustbin of history, because that's how we look at history. Like it's something back then, and you gotta, you know, blow the dust off, you know, to find out what's going on. But real history, that's not how it works. Real history is what we're doing right now. We are engaging in the very nature of the interaction of life. That's what real history is. And then what we do is we try to record or to make some sense of the things that transpire. And a great deal of time, as you do know, we don't do very well at it. We don't do very well. So, but I talked about William Leo Hansberry. I talked about Carter G. Woodson, you know, who was the founder, or the so-called founder of Black History Month. Does anybody know why I say so-called founder? Yeah, no.
Because he might not be the original founder, right?
Well, that's true. That's real easy. That's a good answer, right? Professor Lewis, that's a good answer. But the reason that is because a lot of times when we get information, even when it comes from reliable sources, sometimes that information also is not complete. And it gives you what is the most simplest and what is the most valid information that is available. But if you go and you look up, you know, or you Google, you know, Black History Month and its origin, you'll find not one, but a few different stories, you know. But you will find that one of the key factors was, one thing that all of the stories agree on is that the holiday was developed at Howard University. That's a fact. The issue of who started it has always been a question in regard to, one, the individuals that were involved. And usually, most of the time, whenever events take place of this nature, the personality, the most renowned and popular personality is the one that's going to get the attention. And in this case, that personality was Carter G. Woodson. Now, one of the reasons why I mentioned Carter G. at that particular time was because of the relationship that the university had with him as well as had with Leo Hansberry. And it wasn't nice.
No.
It was not nice. You know, that's why I always say a lot of times, and mind you, and I always like to couch this as well as precursor this, that when we talk about HBCUs, there's a different HBCU in the beginning versus the one you see today. And don't get it twisted. Do not get it twisted. The HBCU that was developed in the beginning was not for you. Don't get it twisted. And to assume that it is, that means you've not read the history of the institution or the individual that were involved in establishing that. So if I asked anybody here, you know, have you ever heard of Howard University? How many people would raise their hand? Okay. Who is General Oliver O. Howard? Oliver O. Howard. That's who again, see, this is what I'm saying, is because she knows and understands that even in the question, it's a loaded question. But it just shows you that most of us are not familiar with that. So they couldn't tell you that General Oliver O. Howard was the president of the Freedmen's Bureau. You know, the Freedmen's Bureau. You know what the Freedmen's Bureau was? They were individuals that were set up for displaced Africans and poor white people after the Civil War that didn't have nowhere to go because of the unique conditions that they were, you know, under. And it was General Sherman that came up with an idea in order to address this issue, because when they went from plantation to plantation, you know, toppling these plantations like dominoes, what began to happen is that you began to release and displace a lot of Africans who had been enslaved at that particular time. And once they began released, they didn't have nowhere to go. It wasn't like, you know, you had, you know, reservations somewhere. So what they did was they began to follow General Sherman around, assuming that eventually that there would be some parity brought to them. And the crowds had got so big that General Sherman had wrote back to, you know, the government and told them, look, you know, I can't be running around with all these people following me all over the place, and, you know. So he said, well, come up with an idea, do something, you know. And at that time, what they had did was they had freed quite a few plantations off of the, you know, South Sea coast of Georgia, which you call the Gullah Islands. And those islands were first targeted as using as land in order to bring some sense of remedy to this particular problem. So what Sherman did was he came up with a concept, and you can write this down, it's called Field Order 15. Field Order 15. Now, y'all might know it as 40 acres and a mule. But Field Order 15 was never a guarantee. It was never something that the government, you know, put in legislation promising to black people. It never happened. And second, when it was established, the president that followed, which was Andrew Johnson, after Lincoln was killed, rescinded the whole program. And all of the land went back to the previous owners, which was plantation owners. And a lot of them had escaped, you know, into the north and wherever particularly they could to escape, you know, persecution at the time. And when Johnson got in, the first thing he said is that the same thing Trump say about the January 6th individual. He said, well, they've been wronged. You know, y'all took their land, their property, you know. So that was the issue. So when we look at these universities, we have to take into consideration a lot of them were set up as buffers between the white power structure, which was white supremacy at large, which was plantation white male landowners, and the individuals individuals that the individuals that were the labor class, which were Africans and poor whites. And what they did was they wanted an outlet that would address some of the issues in regard to what we would call the offspring of those plantation owners with, slave hands, and we call those mulattoes, Y'all know what the mulatto is? Anybody? Mulatto?
Yeah, half black and half white.
No.
Half mule and half man.
That is correct. The term mulatto comes from mule, that is correct, but it's not half black and half white.
No. So why is that?
Because the issue about the term is defined by position of authority. That means who's in control. So what that means is that Barack Obama would never be half black. He would be half white. Why? Because whites are in control and they're dictating what it is to be white, not what it is to be black. So if I said that you were a mulatto, that meant you was half white. If I said you was a quadroon, that meant you was a quarter white. If I said you was an octoroon, that meant that you was an eighth white. Not black. Black does not play into this equation because you are subjugation and you are looked at as property. So you don't equate. So when we talk about these terms, we have to look at them in the context of the political, social, cultural, but most of all, the power that they reigned and held and wielded at that particular time. So when we understand what that means, we use it in context. Yes, ma'am.
So what's the origin of the word mulatto?
It's a Portuguese term, and it really means mule. And it really means, and what is a mule? Anybody know what a mule is?
Mixture between a horse and a donkey.
That's right, which means what?
It's
Can't reproduce. That's why they called it a mule. So you'll find out that it was looked at in that particular context because of its amalgamation. That's why they used it as that. So even now, today, the term is still used, but in different places, it's used in different ways. Here you have an individual who was the former president of the United States, and his mother was white and his father was black. But at no time in America could he walk around and say he was a white guy. At no time. He couldn't go nowhere in America and say he's white and be accepted. But if he put on a turban and a galabeah and went to Tunisia, he'd be white and no problem. Barack Obama would be white. Y'all do know that, right?
Nope.
Yes. And the reason that is because, see, your definition of what it is to be black is not a universal one. It's based on the environment from which we come. And that is based on this chattel slavery. That's the definition that is being used, but that's not a universal definition. So how you see color in North Africa is very different than how you see color here in America. Very different. Or if you go to Asia and they call an individual, anybody know what a Twinkie is? I'm not talking about the Twinkie, the cake, right? I'm talking about Twinkie in regard to race.
No.
Never heard of that?
No.
Well, a Twinkie is a takeoff of an Oreo. And what's an Oreo? And what is a Twinkie?
Yellow on the outside, white on the inside.
So to Asians, a Twinkie is a what?
Tom.
A Tom.
Shambo.
Uncle Tom. Because they're yellow, they're Asian on the outside, but on the inside they're white.
You'd be a Shambo.
See, y'all just did it. A Twinkie. See, again, these are concepts that have been circulated in the community based on slavery, based on the very nature of this diabolical system called slavery. And what's significant about it is that slavery, has been with us ever since the beginning of time. ever since the beginning of time. And ever since human beings been in the planet Earth, there has been some form of subjugation, some particular form. Now, the other thing too is subjugation isn't the same everywhere and all the time. And it's the same thing that when we look at information, you have to look at it in the same context, that all information ain't the same all the time, no matter who it comes from. And the problem is that because we don't really understand the magnitude of what that statement means, we assume that when something is stated as something, it's fixed. That's the way it is, it's truth, it's not going to change. No, that's not what history is about. All historians, all real historians know nothing is fixed in history. In other words, if I said to you, truth does not change, then you don't know about truth. Real truth is ever changing. Real truth is ever changing. If it's not truth. Because truth has to catch up with reality at times. There was a truth that happened 1,000 years ago. A truth was you could not fly in an airplane from New York to California. That was a truth 1,000 years ago. But it's not a truth now. You get what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And when we look at the very nature of how we look at information, you have to look at it in its process of evolution, evolving, changing, you know. So that's why when you go to the dictionary and you look up a word, it has 3 or 4 meanings. And that's because of its evolutionary change over time in regard to what it means. So do you think the word black meant the same thing all the time, everywhere?
No.
But yes, we do. That's how we use it. So if I said that you black, do you think everybody that knows the term uses it accordingly?
What the countries you're speaking about?
Anybody. In other words, here's a good example. The word black is an adjective. And it represents a particular it represents a particular description of how we see something. The only problem is that over time and in different places, the term will go through a process of change in regard to its meaning. So if I say that, if I ask y'all, what color is this? What color that you see here? Oh, excuse me. What color is that?
That's black.
That's black.
That's really black.
Okay, that's really black. And if I said, what color is this?
Rush.
Brown.
So what is that?
Brown.
Brown. He says brown. We go with that. That's brown and that's black. Would you ever say that black is brown?
No. 2 different things.
2 different things. But not in race it ain't. Not in America it ain't. And y'all know that. Y'all know when y'all use the term black in a racial context that it don't mean just this.
Right.
Right. Where that in times in history, that's different. Because in times in history, there were times where it just meant this. There were times in history where it meant other things in regard to either not just black, but dark, or shaded, or dirty. You know. You ever heard the word Schwarzer?
Yeah. Swatsa.
Schwarzer.
That's the Jews.
Like Schwarzenegger.
That's a Jews code.
Huh?
German. Is that a Jewish term?
No.
It's a German
It's a
term.
German term.
Is that what they call? Is that what they used to call Dickens? A Swatzer?
That's right, meaning black. That's all it means.
Kind of the Germans.
Right. The term has its root in chimney cleaners. Did y'all know that?
Yeah.
Guys that used to live in Germany that cleaned chimneys. These were white guys. And after they cleaned them chimneys, they came out real black, obviously. And there was a custom in Germany where that if you wanted to have good luck, when the guys came out of the chimney, you would go rub some of the soot on you, put it on you. That meant you would get good luck. It became such a custom in Germany that during holiday, Christmas times, they had created cards, you know, greeting cards with little packets of soot, charcoal in the card that they send to individuals for good luck. Think about that.
That's kind of came down the chimney.
That's right.
Swats.
Think about that. Now, but not in regard to Santa Claus. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because, remember, Santa Claus and that whole experience is not a German issue, and it's not those particular. Do you know how Christmas came to America? You know who brought Christmas to America? And it wasn't English people.
French?
No. It was the first people that owned this state right here, this New York City.
The Dutch.
The Dutch. It's the Dutch. You know why? Because they literally were into a guy by the name of Sinterklaas, which was a takeoff of Saint Nicholas. Elmira was from Turkey. Saint Nicholas. I mean, again, this is the storyline. Now, you can go, Google the material, but you'll find out that they are the individuals that started the ceremonial and holiday so-called characteristics that we are more familiar with. The giving of gifts and all of that kind of thing. They were very, very instrumental in promoting that. But again, they were also one of the forerunners of the slave trade. See, remember, most of us, when we think about the slave trade, we think of English. And they got nothing to do with it. They have nothing to do with the beginning or the origin or the formation of slavery. Anybody care to elaborate to find out who were the two major culprits?
Portuguese
Go ahead.
and Dutch. And the Dutch.
No.
Spanish?
Yes.
Spanish.
Oh, they was bad. What Spanish is hard.
They were the majors or the first?
Both majors and first, both was the same. But the issue is that, as you do know, one came before the other. And it was the Portuguese that predated anything that the Spanish did.
And Queen Zinga gave them hell.
Yeah, for a while. And what was the end result?
She got killed.
Right, The issue is that we fought gallantly in so many different accounts over the years. But eventually, the reality came to play. Technology ruled out, And it wasn't just then. Technology ruled out eventually in Africa as it began to develop. From the metallurgy periods, from copper to brass to iron, these are major, major periods in the evolution of African history when these particular, metallurgy periods come into play, because it really rearranges their relationship with people around the world. There's a difference between fighting a joker with something copper than fighting a joker with something iron. It's a big difference. Right. It's like bringing the internet into World War I. It just flipped the whole game. So you have to take into consideration that the technology goes back thousands, hundreds of thousands, thousands of years. The first major technological advancement in Africa that changed the demographics was when the Hyksos came in. Y'all remember them jokers? The Hyksos. Their real name is called Heka Kai Sut, which means rulers from a foreign land. That's their name. But we are more familiar with them by the name of Hyksos, which was designated to them by scholars. But the significance is how many people associated the Hyksos with a group of people called the Hebrews, which was one of the most, far-fetched, attempts to look at and to infuse Hebrews in the historical experience. And one of the reasons is because there were certain scholars that have this issue of using wordplay, word association as wordplay in regard to giving designation to a group. That happens through history a lot. I mean, a whole lot. So in this case, the wordplay was the word Hebrew. You ever heard the word Hebrew? And you even heard Dr. Ben talk about this same term many times. And he also used the term in the same context, but it was incorrect. And the word association was the word Hebrew being associated with their word Hebrew. The word Hebrew. Now it's important that we understand this because at the time in which the Hyksos came in, there was no Hebrews. There was no Hebrews. First of all, we have to look at this in the context in which we received the information. There are a group of people that are called Jewish. Y'all familiar with them, right? Jews, right? And anybody know who is the father of the Jewish people? Who is the father of Judaism?
Abraham.
No. We all been smoking.
Judaism.
Judaism, right.
Oh, Judah. Judah.
There you go. I love you. Everybody clap. Why? Because,
The trader.
The name.
well, right. That's exactly right. The name. In other words, Jewish people can only come from the tribe of Judah. Because there are what? 12 tribes. And if you're from the tribe of Levi or the tribe of Benjamin, you would be a Benjaminite. Or you would be a Levite. You get it? Right. So, if Abraham was the first Hebrew, which y'all made the statement correctly, are Jews Hebrews?
No.
No,
Why?
because they come out of the tribe of Judah.
Yeah, but it also is something else involved.
The Hebrews come out of another section.
That is true, but there's more than that.
It's Moses, actually.
Say that again?
Moses.
No, ain't no Moses around yet.
But
Ain't no
Moses even before that.
Yeah, ain't no Moses before that. Remember, in Judaism, there's stars and then there's superstars. This is what Dr. Ben used to say. There's stars and then there's superstars. Abraham is a star. He ain't a superstar. And the reason Abraham, you would think that if he was the first, he was the beginning, he would be the what? The superstar. But he ain't a superstar.
So who would have?
And this is what starts the foundation of why we get the Ham story and slavery and all of that. Because the story is coming from these events. So when we talk about Abraham, and we talk about Abraham as being a star, and we talk about Moses as being a superstar, there's a difference between Abraham and between Moses. What's the difference between Abraham and Moses?
Time.
Say that again?
Time.
Time is very important, and that's one of the classics, but that ain't the correct answer. What's the difference between Moses and Abraham in regard to this particular religious system we call Judaism or whatever you want?
It's lineage.
Not lineage.
Abraham was supposed to be the progenitor, and Moses is supposed to be the one that led them out of bondage, according to the story.
And what you are saying is correct, but you're not using the correct words.
Was Moses real?
Moses was a prophet.
Well, yeah, but the issue is right now, we're not looking at whether they're real or not. We're looking at the story. And this is a story.
Moses came out of Moses, something happened with him.
Location.
And his mother.
No.
Not that.
I'm going to give it to you.
thing.
The difference between Abraham and Moses is Abraham was given a covenant from God. A covenant. And that covenant was based on two things. Only two things. That means that those two things were the basic premise to what Judaism was about. The first covenant was the belief in one God, monotheism. The belief in one God.
That was Abraham.
In the Ten Commandments it says, thou shalt not have any gods what? Before me. Which is not really monotheism, that's henotheism, but again, we'll deal with that later. But in this case, the belief in one God, this is for the first covenant that is given to Abraham, and the second covenant that he gives Abraham is circumcision, that you should circumcise the individual after the 8th day of his birth. This is the only two requirements that are given to Abraham. And at the time that he given Abraham these covenants, he ain't no Hebrew. Anybody know what the word Hebrew mean?
You think they come out of the land of Hebron?
No. That's correct. The term is a Hebraic word that means to cross over. And the word in regard to crossing over, they're talking about rivers. Now the significance of crossing over a river would have to do with based on where you at. So if you read the story of Abraham, you'll find out that he was born somewhere and he was living somewhere. Where was he living?
Chaldea?
He was living in Chaldea. What was the name of the city?
Ur?
Correct. So if he's living in Chaldea and the city was was he speaking Hebrew?
No.
Right, because there's no Hebrew.
Speaking Chaldean.
That's correct, right. Now, but one thing we do know for sure is that after he leaves Chaldea or the city of he leaves there and he leaves and he when he gets to the point of crossing over the river. This is when God gives him the name Hebrew. He said, now you Hebrew, you cross over this. That means that starts the process. So up until that time, he goes through his trials and tribulations, this, that, and the other. But still, it's small fry stuff. And second, there's no people yet. There's no Jewish people, no Hebrew people. They don't exist.
Right.
They do not exist.
Right.
Now, the issue is that Abraham has an issue, and that is that he's married to this woman,
Okay.
but the woman can't have kids.
Sarah?
Right.
Sarah.
So what does he do?
The maid.
No, he don't. Not he. In other words, he wants to have kids, but he can't because his wife can't. But his wife comes to him and says, "Look, in order to make sure that you have heirs, I'm giving you my section. Use Hagar, and you'll be able to get children from her, and that will prolong our lineage." And they was down with it. So as you know, the firstborn, the first child that Abraham has is who?
Ishmael?
Ishmael. And Ishmael is very important because Ishmael sets the foundation to a whole group of people. And then what happens is, not too long after that situation, after Ishmael is born and Hagar is there, not too long after that, God gives Sarah the ability to have kids at 85.
Right.
So once she able to have these kids now, and she decides she's going to have a kid, the first thing she do is she goes straight to Hagar and Ishmael and kick them out.
Right.
Throw them out into the wilderness.
Desert.
Right.
The wife and the
child.
Yeah, both wife and child.
Both.
What's really significant about that event is an event that all Muslims adhere to every time they make Hajj. There's a ceremony or an event that they engage in that represents a pillar in regard to your making Hajj in Islam. Which is what? The Zamzam. And what is it?
Well.
It's a well.
It's a well.
And what is the well representative of?
Live a flowing life.
No.
The what?
The Zamzam well. And you heard Malcolm talk about it. Go ahead.
But that well was placed there because when they was cast out into the desert, there was no water, and they went to, they
That's
went to that
correct.
little hole.
That's correct.
And he stamped them,
That's correct.
and that's
That's
how-
correct.
And that well kept producing water for them.
Right, but that's not what it was for. The specific was, remember, we're talking about a story.
Right.
This is first of all. That means that you can't go to no history book, no anthropology book and find no Ishmael, no Abraham, no Isaac, none of that. That don't exist, not in history.
It's allegorical. It's
Well, again, see, wait a minute, hold on. Again, the issue is that when we use terms allegorical, esoteric, or otherwise, the issue is knowing that the people who use those documents and those material used them in that context, and we don't know that. But we say that because we know that literally that they wasn't using it in that context. So we have to raise it and assume that they were doing it. And see, in history, you got to remember, 99% of history, all history, has gaps. It has a whole lot of gaps, a whole lot of missing space. And what historians do, based on their so-called wise and their intelligent judgment, they try to fill the gaps. And they fill those gaps with what they think is logical, which is sound, which fits within the process of what is taking place. But a lot of times, that's not what actually takes place.
Well, I noticed a lot of the elements represent things in life, like water, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that, but I'm talking about the very nature of how they are looking at the story now, where you go to Mecca and you go to the Zemzem well, and those individuals understand the story. Now, mind you, the story that I'm telling you is a Jewish story. So how did the Muslims end up with a Jewish story? You get what I'm saying? All of this has periods and overlapping and issues where they have to be explained to have a clear understanding. But in the long run, after Abraham leaves there, he goes through that particular process, and God gives him the name as a Hebrew. He's only a Hebrew for a particular time. Because if you notice, the name of what we call the Jewish people was not Jewish all the time. So we already found out that there was a period in their particular history, as they name it, where they were called Hebrews. And here's a good example. There's a group of people that right here in Brooklyn. You see them in Harlem. You see them. They call themselves Hebrew Israelites. You know what we call that in history? We call that an anachronism. Why do we call a Hebrew Israelite an anachronism? Anachronism means that something in history is out of place. That means that you have two things that are occupying the same place that come from different times. It's like saying that Jesus wore Nike sneakers. Nike sneakers come from one time, Jesus come from another time.
So Hagar's children
Yeah.
are different from Sarah's children.
Very much so.
The Hagars, they call them Hagar. They call them a certain name, that group.
Yeah, they do. You know what they call them?
Israelites.
No.
Negro.
No. Y'all jumping the gun here. The people that come from the family or the descendants of Ishmael are called Arabs. That's the whole Islamic community. That's what Muslims live for. Ishmael is their progenitor. Christians and Jewish progenitors, that's Isaac. You get it? This is the story. The story that has been fought between these two groups, Jews and Arabs, it's a family fight.
From the two different women. The mother.
Yeah, but they ain't thinking about that. That's way, way, way down the line. All they thinking about is one is Muslim and one is Jewish and one is Christian.
And they're both Semites.
Say that
They're
again?
both Semites.
Yeah, but I don't like to use the term because the term Semite is...
That's the way they look at it.
Yeah, but what is a Semite?
Oh, come on.
Semi.
No.
Something
Something
that's partial, right?
Hmm?
Something that's partial, right?
No, you using it in a mathematical context. The word semi is something that we use in math. versus, in this case, Semitic, we're talking about one in regard to geography. If you're looking at it from a scientific term, it can be looked at from geography. But Semitic, you know, in regard to, it comes from the base on what this lecture is about. The basis of the lecture is called The Curse of Ham and Slavery.
So
Now, wait a minute. Everybody here ever heard of the Noah story?
Yes.
Right. How many sons did Noah have?
2? No.
No.
4, right?
No.
3.
Who said that?
3. Yeah, he's right.
Asiatic. That's correct. 3.
And Japheth.
Right. Now, what's significant, what's really important about that is that the term that we're using is called Semitic. The reason I say that there wasn't Semitic because the term is erroneous. It's erroneous because there's no Semitic people that ever existed. The reason that is that they say that out of Noah's sons there were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Or they call them Yafet, same gizmo. But Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And what they did was they identified those particular 3 individuals with geography and groups of people. Now, nowhere in the Bible or in the Tanakh where you have anything involving color or geography. I mean, in regard to color via geography. But in the book, but in the explanation, the commentary to the book, then that's when all of that come in. So let's look at this. Here's Noah, right? God is talking to Noah, and Noah gets the job of, listen to this, destroying the whole world. The whole freaking world. Now here's the joke I said to a guy a couple weeks ago. I said, we were talking about killers. And he was talking about Jeffrey Dahmer and all of that. And I said, nah, he lied. I said, the baddest murderer in the history of this planet was God. God killed more jokers than anybody. And the guy said, well, you can't say. I said, yes, I can. I said, well, now I ain't no good reason. Here's a good example. Let me ask you a question. Let's talk about it. Everybody on the planet is destroyed. Everybody. Wait a minute now.
That's just their story.
Yeah, but
you know that didn't happen like that, right?
Yeah, but regardless of what, the issue is that this is the story that's being told. I want to ask y'all, based on all of the people of what the book say that was destroyed, was any of those people innocent? Any of them?
A lot of them were.
It had to be. Some had to be.
They had nothing to do with what was going on over there.
Right. Yeah, but that's the issue is, do you think that people that were killed were innocent? Were any of them innocent?
Yes.
I believe.
Right. Now,
Babies.
that's right, kids, all kinds of things. But the issue is they were killed.
Right.
Now, one thing we also know is there were only 2 animals that were brought on the ship. So that means all of the animals were destroyed. Were any of the animals innocent?
All of them were innocent.
Right. Now, if that was the case and God destroyed them, the only thing, now mind you, this is a perfect God. Perfect.
Right.
You know, perfection don't create imperfection.
That's correct. So
The perfect God created all of this and then effed up. Right? And then said, well, I gotta erase this. I gotta wipe this one out. Right. This is God now.
No, this is somebody else.
Give him my pistol.
What? So
This is somebody else telling the story.
No. This is the Jewish story.
Yes.
Their
Right.
story. Okay.
Yeah, but the issue is the story that we have in regard to Christianity, Islam, and Judaism is their story. Come on now.
Okay.
They're the ones that write the textbooks and the material, and then we end up having to rehash their
Or
material.
interpreting it.
That's correct. That's what it is.
That's the thing, proper interpretation.
Well, remember, all information is subject to interpretation.
Right.
There's only one thing that never changes.
Right.
And that's evidence. Evidence is evidence.
Absolutely.
And you can't change it. You can't change it.
So,
But once you interpret that evidence, then that evidence becomes a fact. See, y'all didn't know that, huh? In other words, a fact is not something etched in stone. A fact is really somebody's interpretation of somebody's evidence. evidence is unchangeable. But when we begin to interpret what that evidence is, then it becomes what we assume to be a fact. Now, in a lot of cases, it has credibility because of the process in which it went through. But in a lot of cases, it don't. So what we do is, again, we try to fill in the gaps. So when we talk about Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and we talk about all of the Jewish people come from the line of these individuals who call themselves Shem. And then all of the black people supposed to come from this line, a group of individuals they call Ham. Right. Now the name of the lecture is Slavery and the Curse of Ham. Is that a correct title?
No.
He's saying no.
I want to feel it's not.
I ain't gonna ask Mike because Mike no. Is that a correct title? The Curse of Ham and Slavery.
Yeah.
He says yes. Explain to us why that's the correct.
According to that story, all people who come from Ham are supposed to be the dark complexion people who are supposed to be the cursed people of God.
No.
That's how I see it.
I understand, but no.
I want to define curse.
I think my opinion is that the story of Ham was used to justify it.
That is correct. That's 100. That's one of the basis of what the relationship between the Curse of Ham and slavery was. But the Curse of Ham as a title is incorrect. It's incorrect. Anybody ever read the story?
He was supposed to have seen his father naked.
Yeah, but that's not it. Mike, would you explain to them what's the difference? Why it should not be called the Curse of Ham?
Well, actually, according to the story, Ham was never cursed.
That's right. See, wait a minute, stop. That's it. You don't have to say any more, Mike. Don't say any more. That's correct. So what that means is that most of us have been going along with somebody's interpretation of what the story said. And when we really read the story say, "Cursed be unto Canaan, and all the descendants thereof." Now that's not to negate the fact that we understand its relationship to, in this case, his father. But the storyline in retrospect is trying to get you to understand that storyline, that narrative is also trying to mold, shape, and create something.
Now, who's this brother Canaan?
Well, this is another issue. Canaan, remember, is the son of Ham. Remember, Ham has 4 sons. And out of those sons is Canaan, Cush, Mizraim, and Punt.
Those are cities.
Yeah, right.
Well, wait a minute, hold on. They're only cities based on terminologies that you are familiar with now. The issue again is to go in history and find these places. And you'll find out that a lot of the terminologies come from what? A certain time. Because when the guy was writing it, he lived sometime. Whoever wrote it, they lived. There's no definitive author to biblical scripture. I'm not talking about what you get from the Bible. You know, John wrote the Gospels and Mark wrote the... Nah. You know, that's... And you can go to any seminary, you can go to any, comparative religion course in any institution. You can go to any scholar of theology and ask them this question. Did the authors who are authored of the Gospels actually write the Gospels? Not one scholar would say yes. Not one.
No. They couldn't have written it.
Why?
Well,
The time, that wasn't, they just going relying on other people, it's hearsay, other words. But they're relying on other people's information.
Well, the issue is this. First of all, we have to go with the issue of, one, how can we validate the written material? You know, how can we know whether it was written at the time in which it was written? 2, by the individuals who are attributed to it being written. You know, I mean, it's like, y'all do know that there's a book called The 5 Books of Moses. I was talking to Mike about this the other day. And that particular 5 books is attributed to being written by somebody. So the Pentateuch, them first 5 books from Genesis to Deuteronomy, somebody wrote them. Now, in traditional theology, they say Moses wrote them. But see, in the 1800s, 1750, a guy by the name of John Hobbes, who was doing research on the biblical scriptures, found out a real serious issue. And that was, it was impossible for Moses to have written it because he writes his own death and funeral and the whole bit. And the joke is just like, well, how did that happen when he was dead? You know, he's describing what had happened at his funeral. So they said, well, we gotta have to find a new explanation for that. So what they eventually did was they decided to take Moses from the authorship of the last book, which was Deuteronomy. And what they did was they decided to attribute only the first 4 books to Moses and the last book to Joshua, because that was the part that put his death and all of that other stuff in there, to give it some sense of reality. But in reality, there's no evidence, there's nothing that could validate that Moses wrote anything. It's just not there. It's like saying that when you read the Bible, if you go to the New Testament, everything is read as what Jesus said. Y'all ever heard of that? Right. Well, in reality, Jesus ain't saying shit. I'm just saying based on what I know. Jesus didn't write a word. He didn't write a letter. He didn't write anything. There's nothing that you can go that Christianity or Judaism can say that this is what Jesus wrote. As a matter of fact, you can't go anything and find anything that Jesus existed. Oh, this is his slipper. Oh, this was his tunic. Oh, he lived right over there. Oh, his mother's right there. His uncle over here.
And he drank wine and ate wine.
And also, you were supposed to be a carpenter, but you can't find nothing he built.
Say that again?
You were supposed to be a carpenter, but you can't find nothing that he built.
Yeah, but you know, it's a lot of carpenters.
So can you say that is that the only one you're saying that about?
No, but I'm saying that, I mean, the reason I'm saying this is because one of the key factors of reading religious books is to read them in religious context. That means they're based on faith. They're based on belief. Belief means to accept something as truth with no proof. To accept something as truth with no proof. Now that don't mean it's true or not true. It just means you accepted it as such. But what you should be doing, if you believe that that is true, I would spend my time trying to make sure it's true. That's what a real Christian would do. But most Christians, they just accept it on face value and keep on walking. So whenever they questioned about the issue, the first thing they do is run for cover. Because they know there's no way they can answer it. When somebody says that Jesus didn't write anything, or Jesus as a human being, as a physical person, didn't exist, it's undeniable. Because all we got is a story. So just because we got a story of Santa Claus, does that make Santa Claus exist? Physically?
Well, in the Bible.
Yeah, but again, I said physically. You know what physical means. Right. So the issue is that
no empirical evidence.
That's correct. That's the term used. No empirical evidence.
Is that a fact?
Well,
And wait a minute, what did I tell you about fact and evidence?
Okay. But now you're saying there's no evidence.
That's right. And no evidence means what?
You cannot analyze the evidence.
If it's no evidence, it's no what?
No
fact.
No fact. You can't, that's right. And remember this. I'm sharing this with you. It's something that trust came up based on my analysis. Evidence and facts are two different things. And a lot of people you go to, you go read books about it, they're going to say that shit is the same. I'm telling you, they're different. Because a fact, evidence is material remains of something or an event. Listen, evidence are the material remains of something or an event. The interpretation of that evidence is called a fact.
That's correct.
Now, anybody who says anything different, I'll challenge you. I don't care how many alphabets you got behind your name, all of that. One thing for sure, there was, how I got onto this was, what had happened was, this was a few years back when that guy, Kellyanne Conway, that was for Donald Trump, and she had made this statement about alternative facts.
Yeah.
And they went after her, every individual. So I had a guy came to me, we was talking about it, and he said to me, that, could you imagine, she said that there's alternative facts. So I said, it is. So she said, you believe that? You? And then when I explained it to him, and I'm telling you that, I explained it to him, and I'm telling you this, that Kellyanne Conway didn't make that statement because of my explanation. She don't know shit about that. She's going with the traditional definition of what it is to have a fact. And then she's talking about the very nature of how facts are interpreted by various individuals. Now, Mike tell you, he was a former police officer, or those individuals who work in the investigating field will know one thing. The first thing you want to see in investigating anything is the evidence. That's the first thing you want to see. Because that literally lays the foundation of what actually transpired. And then, after that, you want to go to talk to the primary personnel that happen to have been there to witness this event. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to create this particular picture of literally weaving together all of these pieces in order to create a picture.
But how would you get the perfect picture? Because you may have the same people there, you get two different storytelling. So how do you do
But
that?
that's but this is the challenge of the officer, the detective, the investigator, the researcher, or otherwise. If their skills are up to par, that don't mean that's light action. Because they know what they have to do in order to get to that. So when they talk to all of the individuals, they know Joker's going to be embellishing shit and saying they seen shit that didn't happen and all of that. And they used to that. They used to that because most seasoned investigators know how information is being communicated and transmitted. There's a lot of people, Mike will tell you, eyewitnesses, even though they seen something, they are not always credible. Right? We don't call them liars, but a lot of times people who say they seen something might not have seen what you think they seen, or what they said they seen. Right. Well, there's an issue of perception and then being able to actually see something. You know what I'm saying? Because many of us have been walking down the street or something, and we walk in and we see something, and we say, oh, that's so-and-so, and then we get up on it and we say, it's something completely different than what we thought it was. And we're just talking about something you see maybe 10, 15 feet away from where you at. Much less to talk about an event after it has transpired and then try to record and retrieve every detail. And if you're not qualified or trained in that, you're going to get it ass backwards, just believe me. But the people who are, those individuals who are trained and qualified, they know what to look for and know what to expect. So they know when they're getting, shammed. The first thing that the guy says...
Or doing the sham.
That too. What they'll do is they'll say, well, something don't sound right about this. Or the evidence and what the person is saying don't meet up. There's always some shortchange. So this is also about how we talk about the story of history or religion or anything else. what do we have at our disposal that's going to give us credible material in order to validate what has transpired? And as I said, the Bible is a book, just like all other history books. It got a lot of gaps. I mean, a lot of unanswered questions and events, you know. I mean, right out of the gate, from the first paragraph, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth.
Oh,
That's a problem.
where was God at?
Not only
No,
was
that the time. How old was that?
No, what he's saying is correct.
There was no
Where is
time.
God at? Because if he's creating heaven, he can't be living there.
Right.
They say,
So where he live at?
the book says
Now
that
we
he
go,
sat on the
now we
circle.
go into something.
He said what?
The book says he sat on the circle of the earth.
No.
7 days. Who was measuring the time?
It's
Huh?
Who was measuring time? 7 days? They say he created everything in 7 days?
No, that's not
6
true.
days
The
or
time
7
never
days?
was when man was
Yeah, but
not.
6 days. Yeah, but not 7 days. Those were 6
6
days.
days.
Yeah, but the 6th day, that's very important.
Who was measuring?
No, but that's not the issue. What happened on the 7th
He
day?
rested.
Why would God need rest?
That's a start. It's a
How does
start.
God get tired?
Well, if God get tired, that means he can get sick.
Right.
And if he can get sick, that means he can die.
It's not a God. That's God's story. Somebody's story started.
I dedicate, you know,
Right, exactly.
you know, my major concern also too, in regard to this lecture, I dedicate this lecture to Dr. Ben, because Dr. Ben is the individual who literally was the personality among us. I have not, up until Dr. Ben, I have never ever heard anybody talk about organized religion like Dr. Ben. Nobody. In the history ever. Now, one of the things that was important was because he was the first individual who actually decided publicly, in a public forum, to challenge and question the whole gizmo. He was not, and this was a guy who grew up as a converted Jew. I mean, that's how he grew up.
Not a Jew.
Yes, a Jew.
Just a Jew.
Yes, a Jew. Remember, always remember. Remember I was telling you about the Hebrew Israelites? Well, that's a misnomer in reality because Hebrews and Israelites didn't live at the same time. As a matter of fact, anybody know how Israelites came to be? In the Bible.
Jacob?
That's correct, which means what?
I forgot the meaning. I don't remember the whole story.
Oh, the whole story was Jacob wrestled with God.
That's right.
And out of that battle came Israelites. Right. Now, I'm going to say this again. Israelites and Hebrews are different. And Israelites and Jews are different. That means they don't occupy the same space and place at the same time. That's an anachronism. So if I said I'm a Hebrew Israelite, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Because it's like saying that, you know, Carter G. Woodson and Dr. Lewis was hanging out together.
That could be.
Dr. Lewis got some age on him now.
Y'all better listen. Y'all better leave my brother. Come over there and knock y'all out. That's a million brother. But what this means is that it's a pure anachronism. So in this case, what Dr. Ben began to do was he began to dismantle, to unwrap and unfold the very nature of the underpinnings of what religion meant to us as a people. And he began to, and in every turn he would be saying, but in Africa we was doing something else. In Africa we did this, and then after he would unfold it, and then he would rearrange it, he would show you all of the African influence that established it as an institution. So when we talk about Christianity or Judaism or Islam, we assumed up until maybe Elijah Muhammad and those individuals that all of those religions were foreign to us. They came from foreign places and they were developed by foreign people. And that the people that ran it were the individuals who really knew of it. What we knew of religion, 99% of it, was a European development. It was a European development. Let me tell y'all this. I know I scared the shit out of you, didn't I? No religion of any magnitude ever got started in Europe. None.
Okay.
Right.
There's no religion, none, on this planet Earth that ever had its major development in Europe.
Jehovah's Witness?
Right there.
Jehovah's Witness is who? Charles Taz Russell. Where's he from?
Cleveland?
You gotta go check it out. Charles Taz Russell. Go look him up. And don't get him mixed up with, you know,
Bill Russell?
he said Bill Russell. Don't get him mixed up with, what's his name? Oh, God.
Casey Russell?
No. The guy that starts the Mormons.
Young.
Yeah, no, not Young. That's bigger.
Okay.
Who started the Mormons? That's right, Charles Smith. So you got Charles Smith and Charles Taz Russell who set up the Jehovah's Witness. No, Judge B. Rutherford took over from Charles Taz Russell. He was a lawyer. That's what his profession was. Matter of fact, Judge B. Rutherford is the individual who you should give credit to for what you see as Jehovah's Witness today. He was the individual. And matter of fact, you know, he was a good friend. He was a good friend with a guy that was one of the major black, he set up his own religion too. You know who his name was?
No.
Elijah Muhammad.
So all of them.
Elijah Muhammad. And let me tell you this. If you look at Jehovah's Witness and some of their practices in regard to how they keep themselves and so on, you'll see they're very, very parallel to the Nation of Islam. Don't you know that in the early days it was requirement for converts and members of the Nation of Islam to listen to radio broadcasts of Judge B. Rutherford? It was required. Judge B. Rutherford. Really? He was the individual who was the premier head of the Jehovah's Witness.
He was also responsible for that train wreck.
Say that again?
There was a train wreck in Park Place in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Killed 107 people.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He was, something had happened with the transit and he took over. And he told Lucky.
He took over.
Lucky Louisiano told him to get up and drive the train.
Told him to drive the train?
It was a strike and the
Right.
was in charge. He became, because of
And you said Judge B. Rutherford was the individual who did
it
this?
was Rutherford or it was him.
Probably Rutherford B. Hayes.
Yeah, man, you might want to.
One of them Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, you might want to check that. I mean, well, in other words, it needs to be investigated a little further.
But it
And
happened.
the significance of, especially if Lucky was involved in it, it was, you know, was something a little different. Because,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, a lot of the gangster boys, you know, they had all different kind of, you know,
Hustle.
well, not just hustles, but they had hands in pots that you just could not imagine.
When he was in charge and he caused people's death.
Oh, well, I mean, like I said, I would, you know, I'm on this, for me, this is the first time I'm hearing of it, but I will go investigate it and find out what I could find out. But usually, in a case like that, most of the time, and when do you think this took place?
27.
Okay. I would definitely have to look into it, but one of the things that usually wasn't always the case is, you know, if you're the leader, you don't do the manual work. You know, I mean, most of the time, you know, somebody else do that. You know, so if it came down to driving the train, I'm trying to figure out why would he.
What's the connection?
That's right, you know. And then second, I could understand. Now, you do know that one of the biggest headquarters of all of the Jehovah's Witness was in Brooklyn.
Wow.
And y'all know that, right?
Still there.
No, it's gone.
So they got rid of West Side.
I've been gone for more than 10, 20, 15 years, maybe longer than that. Right.
Okay, right.
They sold it. They sold that long time ago. They moved to Ohio. Okay. Okay. But what it also means is that they moved to those particular locations because they were getting a lot of feedback in regard to the political apparatus in the city. So they decided that, you know, they can go get cheaper facilities in another particular location, get the same benefit, because I don't know whether y'all know how powerful, influential the Jehovah's Witness is.
Wow.
Do y'all know that?
Worldwide. Worldwide.
Let me just say this. Do anybody know what is the largest denomination of Christians in the world? What particular denomination is the largest?
Would it be the Jehovah's Witnesses?
Say that again?
Would it be Jehovah's Witnesses?
No.
Catholics.
Catholics, straight up. And what is the second largest denomination of Christians in the world?
Protestants.
No.
Baptists?
No. No. Jehovah's Witness.
What?
Jehovah's Witness is only second to Catholics.
Really?
You hear what I just said? Only second to
Worldwide,
Catholics.
right?
Let me just tell you an experience I had before we're gonna have to close down for a break. But this was one year back in this was like it would have to be like late 80s, like 1988, 89. And I went to West Africa, and that particular year, we was going through a whole lot of stuff, and I just wanted to get out of America. And my major concern was I wanted to go somewhere where they didn't speak English, so I could really not worry about it. So a friend of mine from Long Island, who owned a store in Long Island, all of us was part of a study group that Professor Simmons had, and me and him got together and we decided we was going to go on this like 3 or 4 country tour in West Africa. We went to Senegal and Nigeria, Mali, and Ivory Coast, and he went some other, but we all met back up in Nigeria, and then we rented a villa in Senegal. So my major concern was, I speak English, they speak French and Wolof, don't nobody know I'm here, I'm good. So I'm upstairs, I'm laying down, cooling down, all of a sudden I hear a knock on the door. I'm saying, like, who the hell would knock on the door? The place is empty, nobody actually lives here, I'm taking access to it, who the hell is it? So they knock again, I figured that if I just don't answer, they'll walk away, but they just kept knocking. So I go downstairs and I open up the door. And, no, first I say to the door, I say through the door, who is it? And it just dawned on me, I'm speaking in English, right? And I said, probably people don't even understand. So knowing me, I just opened the door. And as soon as I opened the door, the guy said, Watchtower. I almost fell out. I could not believe it. I was like, Watchtower? And he said to me, he said, you never heard of Watchtower before? I said, man, I'm from the States, man. What are you talking about? He said, y'all wouldn't even know Watchtower. It wasn't for us. I said, but I was coming here to get away from that. You know what I'm saying? It was funny, man. But again, what it did, it showed me of how international, as the brother said, Jehovah's Witness had become. And the guy was telling me, he was telling me that they got Jehovah's Witness all over Senegal. Now, mind you, Senegal is a Muslim country, 99% Muslim country. Now, it's Christians there, it's Jews there, but the marginal amount are so minuscule they're not even recorded. But these individuals, and if you see them, they have no fear.
No fear.
No fear. They just walk around, and, because in Senegal, you got Muslims that literally fight one another, kill one another. You got the Tijaniyas and the Moorids, you got Elijah Malik C, and you got Sheikh Hamadou Bamba.
That's deep.
And these jokers, they would fight over jockeying for positions of converts and social, political, and religious, aspirations or positions in society. Because Shakamadou Bamba and those Morits, most of them cornered the ground nut market, which we call peanuts. But in West Africa, that's big, 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 big money. And they cornered it. It's a religious group. And out of that, they made political influences and yielding power. And it's the same thing on the other side with the Tijaniya, with Elijah Malik C, who was the founder of the head of those particular. Even today, here in this particular city, one of the largest African Muslim representations is Morits. With Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba in Harlem, in Brooklyn. Here in Brooklyn, that first year, this was back in the 80s. You had Mustafa Mbeki. He is the son of Sheikh Mutala, who is the grandson of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. Right here in Brooklyn. He had an organization called the Rasul Society. And when Mutala would come from Africa, they put him in a Rolls Royce in Harlem, riding big white Rolls Royce. And all of them be following the Rolls Royce, dressed in there, beating themselves.
So those people stick together. The Jehovah's Witnesses did not.
Say that again?
The Jehovah's Witnesses did not, whatever they was following, they didn't know how to congeal, to keep their Rolls Royces things together.
Who did?
Jehovah's Witnesses.
No.
They built their buildings.
Are you feel okay?
No, you come feel.
You're mixing it up. Mixing it up.
Yeah, the reason I'm saying that is because I'm pretty sure you know Jehovah's Witnesses is still in existence.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about their unity. They're not unified like those people that you mentioned.
The Muslims?
No, I beg to differ. I really beg to differ.
Well, that's what
These the individuals. Well, remember, the Jehovah's Witnesses are the individuals that say, okay, we need a new church here. They built that shit overnight.
So what I'm
That
talking
means all of the Jehovah's Witnesses from the whole areas, they all come and they will stay until that church is built from the ground up. You go anywhere, you'll see it done. Yes, anywhere. When I seen that, it blew me away. It just blew me.
Nice building.
Listen, I'm telling you, the best of the business. You know? And when I seen that, I said to myself, I said, wait a minute, hold the hell up. I never seen them organize that kind of labor and the finished product, and it blew me away. Only reason I knew, because a guy that I had worked with, he was a Jehovah's Witness, and we used to always talk, and we was back and forth and everything. This was about 25, 30 years ago. And he had finally, the job that we was working at was a shipping and what's the name job, and he had finally got accepted at PSE&G, you know, the light company. And he was telling me, he was saying, look, he said, since you know so much, and you was 3 minutes, he said, since you know so much, and he said, I would like you to invite you to come and to be amongst. I said, man, you know, I get in trouble, you know, with your folks over here. He said, no. He said, I've been talking to some of them about you, this, that, and the other. He said, but listen, he said, I just want you to come and see, you know, and experience some of the things that we do. He said, so this weekend, we're going to be building a house. I mean, we're going to be building a temple for an individual. I said, a temple? He said, yeah. I said, so y'all going to start it on Saturday? He said, no, we're going to start it on Saturday and finish on Sunday. I said, the whole place? He said, you hear what I just said? I was like, no, man, that's not. Bro, when I seen all of the people and all of this shit and how they was working, I was like,
And it's well
and it was done.
And
it was done.
The grass
Right.
is well kept.
But again, you know, this is just to give you some idea in regard to the material. And remember, this is just establishing the part of the religious aspect in regard to the slave issue. In our follow-up, because this is a two-part lecture, in our follow-up, we're going to deal with the detailed issues pertaining to slavery, but we really have to clear up the issues about the religious aspect. and what role that played in regard to the foundation of slavery, because we are now talking about the curse of Ham. That was a story, but we got to also talk about the institution of Catholicism, because that is the foundation in regard to the relationship of how we see the Western world the way we see it. In other words, the way slavery was able to be implemented was at the behest of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church. The Catholic Church.
Yes, sir.
The Catholic Church.
Yes, sir.
And I'm telling you, based on all of all of the evidence that have literally been brought into play in regard to their role. And I'm saying it goes all the way from the Pope, all the way down to the common rank and file. And it blew me away, because when I thought about slavery, I knew religion was involved, but I never knew the magnitude. And then I never knew the relationship of the individuals who were. So in our next follow-up, we're going to deal with that. But before we leave tonight, I'm going to deal with some of the issues pertaining to the Pope and the Catholic Church as the initiators of the trade, and then all of the other individuals. When I say the initiators of the trade, I want y'all to be clear. I'm only talking about West Africa. I'm only talking about the Atlantic slave trade. This is very important, because at the same time there was an East Coast trade going on. Anybody know the difference between the East Coast and the West Coast trade? It's real easy. One went for 400 years and the other one went for 1,400. 1,400! And it's still going on right now. But without further ado,
We're going to have a break. Zoom audience, you can unmute yourself, have conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want any soup, give Trust a big hand. We're going to have a 10-minute break. That's it. And then Trust is going to come back.
before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to my sister Keisha. I see she on the internet, and she just does.
Brother Trust, I see you.
Yeah, well, I want to make sure that I acknowledge you and the fine work that you do here in Brooklyn as well as in the city, and she represents a strong, powerful black woman who do not play games when it comes down to getting work done.
Who's that?
And that's Sister Keisha.
Ah, please.
And it's always important to make sure that we acknowledge and give praise to those individuals who are carrying the torch, those individuals who are making it their business to do, the work. So always, it's good to know that Keisha's in the house. Now, as we get back into the scheme of things, one of the things about the whole issue pertaining to this issue about the curse of Ham was, from the very beginning, the story was wrong. Because Ham wasn't cursed, it was cursed beyond the Canaan. And then 99% of the people who have heard of the story never read it. Have never read the story. As a matter of fact, everybody here has heard of Christianity, right? Mostly, right? How many of y'all have ever actually read the Bible? I mean, actually read it. I'm not talking about what you had in church or anything, but actually read the book.
Genesis and Revelation.
He said Genesis to Revelation, you read from cover to cover. Okay, I'm going to ask you just one question, and it's not something very complex or anything. In your readings, based on the Bible, how was a woman created?
Rib for man.
He said a rib from man. Is he right?
From the rib of a man.
Melvin Waters says from a rib of a man.
That was according to that story. That's supposed to be the second time.
Now, the issue is, what Mike is saying is that most of y'all, when y'all make the statement that a woman was made from the rib of a man, how could they come to that conclusion if they read the book? If you read the book, it's impossible to come to that conclusion.
Adam and Eve.
No, but I'm saying is you read the story of Adam and Eve in Genesis, and I asked you the question, how was a woman created? And the answer is from the rib of a woman. What it's telling me is you didn't read it.
That's right, that's not what it says.
Right. And what it's saying is that you heard the story. The story has been repeated so often and so much that you assumed that it was legit. You assumed that it was accurate. So you went with it, and everybody, even pastors, make the same claim. I met pastors, I asked who was the 3 sons of Noah, he didn't know. I mean, like, this is monumental stuff. But here we're talking about, you know, individuals who actually read the material. Now, there's an old saying in scholarly circles that the Bible is the most sold book in history, the most sold book in history, but it's the least read. Anybody know what is the second most sold book in the world?
Correct.
No. And it's sold in every language, anywhere in the world.
Dictionary.
There it is. I love it.
What is that?
Dictionary. The dictionary is the only book other than the Bible that is sold in every language, any place on the world. And one thing that's different between the dictionary and the Bible is the people who have dictionary read them more often than they read the Bible. Now, mind you, I want to be clear here. 99% of the people who have a dictionary never read it. They only read word entries. You know what I'm talking about. If I ask you, have you ever read the introduction to a dictionary? There are very few people that say, oh, yeah, I read it. He ain't never read no introduction. I had a guy came to my study group one night. He was going for his master's degree. So, you know, and I was like, okay. So, you know, at that night, you know, I got a big, you know, like about a Webster's dictionary, about 300,000 entries. Because y'all do know in the English language, you got about 800,000 words. This one's big one like that. So I tell this guy, so the guy, he's asking one of the other individuals, you know, what we gonna be covering tonight. So he said, we studying the dictionary. So the guy said to me, he said, the dictionary? I said, oh, then you studied the dictionary, you know the dictionary. He said, yeah, man. He said, I'm a graduate, I'm getting ready, you know, get my master's degree. So I said, no, I didn't ask you whether you read a dictionary. I asked you, have you studied the dictionary? He said, man, I told you. I said, listen. I said, you know what a diacritical is? He said, no. I said, you ain't never read a dictionary then. The hell are you talking about? I said, you a master's degree. You telling me you going for a master's degree and you read the dictionary. I asked you about a diacritical, which is an accent over a letter to determine how it's pronounced. You can find that out in any dictionary. You just open up the first page. It's going to tell you how to use the vowels, how to use the terms, how to use the symbols in the book. It'll tell you whether the definition is the oldest, that's first, or the most recent. It'll tell you the parts of speech. If I ask you what is the etymological definition, you can go to any dictionary, and when you see them 2 brackets like that, what it's going to say is G, dot, meaning Greek, Middle English, Old French. It's not a book that we just look up words and you think you know what's going on. Why do you think most people don't know how to pronounce words? Because they don't know how to use language. If you knew how to use the language, when you see the word, immediately you know what to do. But we didn't do that. Most of our educational experience was based on memorization. That's it. Repetition. Feed back to me what I feed to you.
Yep.
Where that what we do in our study groups, our major concern is how to think. As a matter of fact, I don't even care what you study. I really don't care. I don't care what you read, none of that. I just want to make sure that whatever you read, you are clear and you understand what you read. If you don't understand what you read, what's the good? What's good about reading it?
You ain't reading.
Right. And you're not really getting anything from it. So when we talk about these subject matters, we're talking about them trying to investigate to broaden our knowledge and understanding in regard to our, not just our perception, but what the evidence has to provide for us. So when we talk about these stories, we're not talking about them in just hypothetical terms. You see? So we're looking at the story based on the influence of the individuals who created the story. And 99% of y'all, when y'all heard this story, you got it from a Christian. And you thought it was Christian. When it's actually a Jewish story. It's like when I was telling you about Abraham coming from Chaldea, and anybody know at what point do the group that we call Hebrews or Israelites actually become a group, a religion? That actually become a group, a religion with a language and a people and a culture and all of that. Because one thing we do know for sure is when he left Chaldea, he wasn't no people.
No, that only happens after they leave out of, allegedly leave out of Egypt, right? When they become a culture and all of that?
Well, explain it to us. Give us some insight so that way we can get some idea.
I think the concept, they learned the concept of religion in Egypt.
Yeah, but what I want you to try to do, Mike, is to show how you went from that transformation of one individual, Abraham and his father Terah, leaving there and ending up in Egypt. Now, by the time he left there and they got to Egypt, were they Hebrews? Did they have a Hebrew language? Did they have a Hebrew culture? Was there a temple to go to? You get what I'm saying? In other words, was there a people?
Not yet.
They were a family.
They were a family.
And explain to them what that family was and when they did get to Egypt, how many it was.
It was 70.
It was 70. And not only it was 70, because if you notice, Dr. Ben, again, I just love this guy. Dr. Ben taught us that when we look at language, that language also told us the spirit of the time in which that language was written. And what they began to find out was they began to look at the language of the biblical writings. And they began to find out that certain books were written before other books. Because you can see it in the language. That this language existed before that language. They was writing about this over here, when over here they wasn't writing about it. And one thing he found out was that in the book of the Bible, he found out that Exodus is the oldest book, the oldest written book in the Bible. Exodus. So how did Genesis end up before Exodus? Anybody know? And Dr. Ben was smooth, man. He was smooth. He would always come up with answers that were so simplistic that you would say to yourself, God damn it, how could I not think of that? Anybody?
What was the question?
Why did Genesis come before Exodus? If Exodus is the oldest book that was written.
Maybe the name Genesis.
Well, here, I'm gonna see if you can answer the question by me. Say that again, Asiatic?
The meaning of the words.
That's it, the meaning of the words. Right, and not only the meaning of the words, but what we're really talking about is that if I ask you this question, who came first, God or people?
The people of God.
That's comedian talk. Give me an answer. Who came first, God or people?
Well, if you go by Dr. Ben, people created the concept of God.
People.
Well, let me ask you a question. Forget Dr. Ben. Can there be a God without people?
Yes.
How?
No. No, we can't.
How?
Yeah, I'm asking, how can you know that there's a God if there's no people? Yeah. In other words, God, this is what Dr. Ben used to say, that man made God so God could make man. Man made God so God could make man. In other words, if there's no perception of God, God does not exist. Now the issue is, it has a lot to do with what and how you see that God, but again, that is the answer in regard to why Genesis, if it's not as old as Exodus, why Exodus came first. And that is that, see, in Exodus, that's when the people are created. And once the people are created, then they can create what? Their origin. See, if you don't have no people, you don't have no origin. So once the Hebrews create a people, then they have to come up with where they came from. So that's where the whole story of Genesis came into play.
So basically they write themselves into history.
What do you think? Wait a minute, let me ask you a question. If you, as a Jewish person, wrote a Jewish book, would you make Muslims heroes?
No.
Okay, shit. Well, if I'm a Jew, everybody in the story is going to be a hero. That's my fault. If I'm writing a book, I'm Jewish, who you think going to be the chosen people?
You.
Shit. I ain't no way I'm going to make some other jokers chosen. And we don't take into consideration when we read these books. Those are part and parcel part of the narrative that goes with how we should be looking at the story. So to assume that Jewish people are chosen and they wrote the book, do that sound suspect? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then you got individuals who really, I had a brother told me, he said, well, the original people was Hebrews. I said, wow, that's deep. He said, you don't think that the original people was Hebrews? I said, no, I don't.
The original people where?
Well, again, this is the whole issue. That when we talk about religion, we talk about a time period. When we talk about human beings, we talk about a time period. What was here first, human beings or religion?
People.
People.
Human beings.
Right. You got people on this planet, you got 7.5 billion people. 7.5 billion people on the planet Earth. And out of those 7.5 billion people, 7.5 million years, those people been on this planet. The 7 billion been, from their origin until now, been on the planet for 7.5 million years. 7.5 million years. Now, out of those 7.5 million years, 7,400,000, we only lived in Africa. That means we never at no time left Africa for 7,400,000 years.
Yes, sir.
And what you today call races, or in science we call human variations, they are something that developed in the last 100,000 years.
Modern man?
No. See, when you talk about modern man, you're assuming that races came into being then. No. Modern man, just telling you that humans had developed to a certain stage at a certain point. And in our process of moving around the world, we began to inhabit these particular areas. So you got brothers, you know, I was in a conversation with a brother and we was talking about, he was telling me about everybody got Neanderthal blood in them. And I was like, man, you out your mind. Smoking Gigi dust and shit, you know. But he said, I said, there are people who do have a certain amount of Neanderthal blood. I said, but in regard to Africans, that's minuscule. So he said to me, he said, white people are the descendants of Neanderthal. I said, no. So he said, yes, they are. I said, man, what do you know about Neanderthals? So he said, I said, give me some timeline. So he had no clue. So I said to him, I said, well, you actually think that white people are direct descendants of Neanderthal? Did any of y'all think that?
No.
Do y'all know the difference between a Neanderthal and a white person? Well, let me just say this. Are white people, the ones that you see today, are they the ones that were the first people in Europe?
No.
No, we weren't.
No. Who were the first people in Europe? Neanderthals. There was no human, no Homo sapiens sapiens in Europe.
I see what you're saying.
No, they didn't exist. As a matter of fact, those Neanderthals lived in Europe for 350,000 years before any Homo sapien even got there. That means all of what we know today of Europe were literally inhabited by Neanderthals. Only until the last stages of Neanderthal existence did they begin to have any kind of contact or relationship with Homo sapiens. And it was marginal. So marginal that even today, a lot of the scientists are literally trying to go down that rabbit hole, but they are only finding anywhere between 1% and 2% of what we today call Neanderthal genetic code that is present. And what's funny is most of the Neanderthal genomes are only in white people. In other words, it's showing that the actual contact that was had when the Neanderthals were dying out and the Homo sapiens were coming in was marginal, but it was traceable to only 1%. And a guy was saying to me, he was saying, well, because he was saying that Spencer Wells and these guys, they were trying to really, validate that, Europeans had this particular, Neanderthal influence. And I said, here where even the scientists grab for straws because they're trying to place themselves into the mix. It's like Jewish scholars, like the University of Chicago, when they first set it up, not a good percentage of the scholars were all Jewish. So when they talking about ancient history and they talking about the they talking about the Hyksos or the Mesopotamia and all of that, they were trying to fit the Jews as a people into the storyline. And the only problem is, there's really no evidence for anything they're talking about. But because they fit it in and they got everybody to accept it, individuals read it and assume that there were some Hebrews that existed. A guy tell me, well, a Semite. Well, in most cases, they'll use the term you said. They'll use the term Semite. Now, in anthropology, the word Semite is such a loaded word because in a contemporary context, the word only refers to languages. It's a linguistical term. Why? Because it's relative to geography. And what it meant was, as you said earlier, that would mean that a lot of people will encompass that title as Semites. Ethiopians, Africans, Western Asians, Southern Europeans would meet the criteria. But when you use the term, 99% of the people that use the term Semite or Semitic, they are talking about Eastern European Judaism. They're not talking about Jews in general. Here's a good example. My dear, you ever heard of a Kashim Jew?
Yeah.
Where they from?
Northern Europe.
No. You ever heard of, my dear, you ever heard of Kafang Jew?
Yep.
No.
China.
China. Have you ever heard of a Marrano Jew?
Spanish.
Marrano. M-A-R-R-A-N-O. Marrano. No. Anybody ever heard of a Sephardic Jew?
Yeah.
That's good. Anybody ever heard of a Beta Israel Jew?
Once, I've heard that once. but I don't know.
Beta
I
Israel.
heard that.
You should know that. Listen, if no other Jew in all of history, if you don't know any other Jew, you should know that.
Been going around New York.
And the reason that you should know, because one of the greatest black historians in the world come from those people. That's right, Doc Benton. And his name is Beta Israel. You know what the name means? House of Judaism.
Peach Valley.
And one of the significance of that is that they have been given a derogatory, pejorative name called Falashas. What does the word Falasha mean?
Strange.
Strange. Now, what group of people would call themselves strange? And we run around talking about, oh, the black Jews, the Falashas. That ain't their damn name. And don't call them that. It's a disrespect to them, a disrespect to the religion, but most of all, a disrespect to our great teacher. So when we look at these stories, we got to go deeper than the surface. This is not, some, romper room, back and forth of, anything goes. Real research is about study. It's time consuming, and most of all, is serious. A lot of times, like I was telling Sababu earlier, we have a new generation of YouTube scholars. YouTube scholars. They watched a few videos. They don't even read the book. They might read a couple of passages or something like that. And then they running around telling you they the greatest thing since sliced bread. The greatest thing since sliced bread. And ain't really studied anything. I've been doing this for 40 years. I'm still reluctant to call myself a scholar. Other people do that. But the reason I don't, because my major concern is about research and study. And it's not about what people call me or how I see myself in that context. But it's about really the dissemination, the circulation of the information. That's primary. And we have to begin to understand that. So when we see these stories and they are brought to us from all of these different places, we are the custodians. See this group here? This group is together because y'all now have taken the responsibility as being the caretakers of our history. That's your job. You don't get to know and just walk away. That's not how it works. You get to know and then you have to become responsible. But what we do, we thought it was go put your little, cassette tape or your videotape, get it, go home, look at it, sit down, and man, that was great.
Trust is bad, brother.
That's how we look at it. We're not looking at it like, damn, what I gotta do with that one? Yep. What it is, every time y'all know that those that come to my spirit, y'all know one thing about me. If you read something, you ain't gonna get the option of walking away saying that, I asked him a question about it and you say I agree with him. Like that's okay. No. No, that don't work like that. No, you have to hold your own when it comes down to your level of understanding. I want to make sure that you are interacting with the text, interacting with the information, so that you can begin to absorb it and see how it works. It's not, and I was telling Sababu, right now in our Friday night, we doing Psychology of Self-Hatred. It's probably one of the most powerful books, bar none, that Amos wrote. And here's a guy who don't play around when it comes down to writing books. Look, see this book here? See this book?
It's a big book.
Look, it's about 900 pages. I could beat your mama with this book. See how big that book is? Blueprint for Black Power. Let me tell you this. This is not a book to be read. Let me say that again. This is not a book to be read. It's only a book to be studied. It's a reference book. You're going to always use it. It's going to be like every, let me go see what Amy said about it. Let me go see what Amy said about that. Because it's so much, it's a plethora of so much in-depth information. And you know what its primary goal is? To make your ass think.
That's right.
It's about making you think. And what we do, we get caught up into the personality of the man. That's what we did with Doc Ben. He'll tell you how many people Dr. Ben followed. If you ever ask them how many actually read his books, bruh, I could probably count them on my two hands. And it ain't like Dr. Ben's books are easy to read, but it just shows you how they were moved or how they consumed the information. So when we talk about the story pertaining to whether they be religious or historical events, if you are researching material or reading material and you are not asking yourself questions as you read, you ain't getting it. I'm telling you, you ain't getting it. Because it's impossible to read something and not ask yourself questions about what you read, because it would give me the impression that you're just accepting whatever you read, you know, and going along with it. So I'm going to read something to you real quick because we're going to be closing down in a minute. And this is going to set the stage for the opening of what the next lecture is going to be involved with. And this is the relationship between the Catholic Church the slave trade and the two major practitioners in the early stages of this trade. Now, mind you, primarily we're only talking about the West Coast, because at the same time as this going on in the West Coast, there's things going on the East Coast. Because most of the time when we grew up, when we talked about slavery, ain't nobody ever tell me about no damn Arab slavery. Not one word. Not one word. And the Arabs were smooth because they was doing all East Coast, North, and some of the West. They wasn't playing around. They got real busy. Them jokers you call Moors, where you think they came from? They wasn't just black. That's another one, you know, we running around thinking that the term Moor, you know, has one meaning. You know, the Moors go a long way back. The term goes a long way back. The problem is we try to use the term as a generic term for everything. So when we use the term Moor, was the term Moor always black?
Probably long time.
Well, the issue was, first of all, it would be based on, let me explain always to you. This is a process, and take this in. Whenever, anytime anybody gives you a word, I don't care what it is, the first thing you do is go to an etymological dictionary or Google and find out where the origin of the root of that word comes from, what language and how they used it. And then you'll see that when you see the word, that word would go through an evolution. So the word Moor, how many people spell the word Moor? You?
M-O-O-R.
She said M-O-O-R. Is that correct, Dr. Lewis?
Today.
One way. That's one way. See what he said? He said one way. The reason he said one way, because he knows that there's more than one way to spell the word. But most people, when they see the word, they assume that that's from which it comes. But that word that you're talking about, it's an English word. But what if I spelled that word, Dr. Lewis, M-A-U-R? R. What would that be?
That might be right too.
Not might be.
It is.
the difference between M-A-U-R versus M-O-O-R?
The language.
Language, that's it. And one thing you're going to find out that's very important about language is also when you find language, that's going to bring in time. Because the language begins to define time based on certain periods. Now, what you're going to find out is the M-A-U-R is of Greek origin. Greek. Who came first? The Greeks or Muslims? I want to say, who came first? Greeks or Muslims?
Greeks. I say Muslims.
No way.
We're talking smoking joint. When was Muhammad born? Anybody? When was Muhammad born?
Greek 632?
No.
5 something?
No. Yeah, 5 something,
But the
right?
word Muslim itself, the origin of that word, we're talking about language.
Yeah, but the
only
issue.
Greeks.
Yeah, but no. The issue again, when you talk about the word Muslim, it's like saying, it's like.
Arabic.
Yeah, but
Is
what?
Arabic older than Greek?
Yeah, that, of course, Greek is older than Arabic. Arabic is like last weekend. What do you think? Arabic is old?
But hold on.
Circa
You said that-
1400.
Say that again?
Circa 1400.
No, that's circa 1400 for Islam, not for Arabic.
Right.
Okay.
So Arabic.
That's what I meant.
Right. Islam has its beginning in 622 AD. If you go to the Muslim calendar, it's called the year of one of the Hajra. Hajra means the fleeing of Muhammad from Mecca to Medina. Most of us who actually study Islam understand that the beginning of Islam wasn't in Mecca. It was in Medina. And Medina is the foundation for the development of the institution of Islam by the Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Now, most individuals who read the material, they know that. But a lot of us don't. So we assume that based on where they go and make pilgrimage and, you know, the Kaaba is Mecca and that's where it started. But no, that's not where it started. And when we think about the very nature of Arabic as a language, much less as a written, you know, script, it's relatively new. I'm telling you, relatively new. The area from which the oldest writing in Arabic is called, oh God, it's a box script. It's called, it's in the area called the Hejaz region of Saudi Arabia. It's not too far west of Medina, but it's the place where the oldest writing of Arabic had its origin and the language also had its influence. Here's a good example. What was Arabs called before Arabic came out? If Arabic is new, what were they called before that? And again, I found this out from Dr. Van.
Tribal language.
There's a group.
Or Saracens?
That's correct.
It's not so serious.
No, Saracens. Okay, we getting close. Saracens, and that's correct. So in other words, those individuals who we call Arabs today, who live in the same area, at one time they were being called Saracens. And that's what they were called throughout history for a long time. And then all of a sudden when they became Arabs, most individuals, they only associate Arabs with Islam. So if I ask you right now, my dear, do you know what language the Iranians speak? You know, from Iran.
No, I don't.
Anybody?
Farsi.
What's the difference between Farsi and Arabic?
Farsi is a derivative of Persian, isn't it?
That's correct. Why would it be a derivative of Persian?
That was once ancient Persian.
Case closed. Case closed. So what it means is that, one, Iranians are not Arabs. 2, Iranians don't speak Arabic. 3, they are Muslims. See the problem here? If you go to Iran and call them an Arab, you might be in a hell of a fight. Because they don't look at them too favorable. And as we close down, again, this is setting the stage for next week. I'm going to read this paragraph and we're going to close out. The material that I will be reading from this evening, History of Slavery, Susan Everett. History of Slavery, Susan Everett. This book was published by Cartwheel Books Incorporated, and it was originally published in 1996. Yeah, 1996. So it's readily available. This is just going to give you an opening, and then later on, the material that I'm reading here, we're going to go into detail, and I'm going to show you the connection between this, the Pope, the doctrine of discovery, the acquisition of land, the subjugation of Africans, Europeans, Moors, Sub-Saharan Africans, all of them. Slavery of a sort began almost as soon as Columbus discovered the New World. The impetus for it was an extraordinary arrangement arrived at by Spain and Portugal. Let me just say this again. It says, slavery of a sort began almost as soon as Columbus discovered the New World. The impetus for it was an extraordinary arrangement arrived at by Spain and Portugal. In 1493, the Pope responded to an appeal for arbitration between the two principal contenders of colonial possessions. In other words, the Pope was brought in as a mediator in a scuffle between the Portuguese and the Spanish. And this is what the Pope did. It says, in 1493, the Pope responded to the appeal for the arbitration between the two principal contenders for colonial possessions, Spain and Portugal, eager to see the world safely, which is another issue, to see the world safely divided between Catholic powers whose influence would save heathen souls. He allocated the eastern territories of the world, the eastern territories of the whole world, outside of Europe to Portugal. That means everything east of the Atlantic Ocean was Portugal's. This is what the Pope said. And then he said that the line of demarcation ran down the Atlantic. The Portuguese, however, were dissatisfied with a decision which denied them Brazil. So in other words, if you see the Atlantic Ocean, I don't have that here, but if you see the Atlantic Ocean, you know you have the east on this side and you have the west on this side. So if you see the Atlantic Ocean right down, that would be Africa and Europe and so forth. And then on this side would be America, Brazil, so forth and so on. And what they were saying was that that Atlantic Ocean was the line.
Right.
And the line meant that anything, and the name of the papal bull that was executed by Pope Alexander VI. His name is Pope Alexander VI. But his real name, this is what really blew me away. I was telling Mike, I was just blown away with this. And because it was like maybe a couple of weeks ago, I'm going to Netflix and I watched this series, The Borgias. Now I know about, these criminal popes and all that, but I wanted to see this series they had on, and it was about the family of the Borgias, and these are some ruthless, the ruthless, underhanded, conniving, killing, everything you could imagine. And his name was Reggio Borgia. Matter of fact, it was two individuals in his family that actually became pope. But what was significant about it was, I didn't know that when he became Pope, he changed his name. I knew all popes changed their name, but I didn't know what name he changed. I come to find he changed his name to Alexander the Sixth. I was like, oh my God. Because I kept saying to myself, how in the world did the Pope begin to say, well, he got power to give people the world? You know? And then my other issue was that I didn't realize the connection because Reggio Borgia was Spanish. See, the connections all play in. Remember the woman who married King Henry VIII? Her name was Catherine of Aragon. Aragon is half of what? Spain. Remember, Spain was actually cut into 3 parts. One side was Castile. The other side, Aragon, and the southern region, I can't remember that, but that was another region. And all of the people that was Spain come from those areas. And didn't realize that the woman who was married to King Henry VIII, her uncle was the King of Spain. I wasn't able to connect the dots. And when I read this and found out, when I watched that movie and found out that he had changed his name to Alexander and put all of it was like everything just merged. I was like, oh, that's what. So what had happened was, Reggio, he was trying to be this big cheese. He was never a pope before in all his life. The families in Europe, all they tried to do was jockey for a position on who was going to get the big spot, which was the pope. So you had the Sportsman's family, you had the Medicis, you had the Borgias. These is all religious families that actually went out and literally paved their way by conniving, killing, maiming, and murdering individuals to be in the top spot. So much so, they even have a period in papacy rulership that they call period of the harlots. You know what that means? Hoes! Hoes ruled the papacy!
What's wrong with that?
Hoes! I'm saying prostitutes, hoes! I'm not saying that this is what trust is saying. There's a book called The Dark History of the Popes. Get it. The Dark History of the Popes.
What's the Netflix?
Hold on.
Go ahead, teach about it.
And in that book, it will give you information. I'll tell you what I'll do. I just gave you the name of the book, but the next time I come, I'm going to bring the book. And, because they got the Dark History of the Popes, the Dark History of Kings, the Dark History of Presidency, Dark History of Christianity. They got a series of these jokers. They got Dark History of the Presidents. Oh, bro, I'm telling you, some of the stuff you see in there, it'll blow you away. Blow you away. One more thing, and we're going to stop for real. This is just to give you an idea so I can make you really go out and search for that book. There was a pope, his name was Pope Stephen. And he had wanted to be pope real bad, real bad. But what had happened was the guy who was pope before him, Pope Formosus, he felt that Formosus was a backslider. And when the church was under attack, they felt that he backslid, capitulated with the enemy, and eventually, when the church got back in power, they accepted him and brought him back into the flock. And Pope Stephen was like, oh, hell no, he shouldn't be up in here. He collaborated with the enemy and all of that, and y'all saying that he okay? No, that's something wrong with that. So Stephen was under the impression that I'm going to get this joke, I'm going to really get him. So little did he know, the guy he wanted to get eventually became Pope before he did. So what had happened was, he had became Pope, and then, like I said, he wanted to kill him, but he never could kill him. But before Stephen became Pope, this guy died. He died. So Stephen eventually becomes Pope, and he gets into the position. But he's so pissed because he wanted to kill this guy. He really wanted to kill him. But the guy was already dead. So he came up with an idea. He went and in the crypt, he dug this joker up. He dug him up. And then what he did was he took his bones and all of that, and he dressed him up in all Pope regalia. And he put him on trial in a court. And he tried this joker and convicted him. This is a dead corpse on the freaking trial. Right. And then after he convicted the joker, they cut off his head, and then threw his remains in the Tigris River.
Professor Mackey told us that story.
Now, what's funny about this is that's just off the chain. But what's funny about this is that one pope later, he said that, one pope later, another joker finds out, after they throw him in the Tigris River, what had happened was his followers were so upset about the situation, they went into the river and tried to retrieve whatever remains that they could find. And they got whatever they did, and they encrypted that and put it back in its internment. 2 popes later, a joker found out what they had did. He went and dug homeboy up again.
Oh, shit.
And they flipped it again. Now, mind you,
What's left of it?
well, again, forget all of that. My thing is that if that's what you do, what sense of morality or ethics do you have in an institution like that? How can you put your faith, your belief in an institution of that particular magnitude and assume that they're going to be righteous, just, and do the right damn thing? You are out of your damn mind. But yet, this is how they played the game, and they got the world believing that look at what Francis, I gotta give him credit. He's a little bit better than some of them other jokers, like Benedict XVI or Pope John Paul II. Them some ruthless jokers there. They ran around giving you this impression that they was cool and they was all right and they was reaching out, but underneath the background, ruthless jokers. Benedict XVI, he was cold. Benedict XVI, his name was John D. Ratzinger. That was his real name. And he was literally leading the brown shirts. He was a youth organized for the Nazi party in Germany. Wow. They know it, he know it, everybody in the church know it. He the only pope in the last freaking 200 years that resigned. Ain't no pope resigned. You die in the neighborhood. That's it. Why do most popes die?
Syphilis.
No.
Because it's time.
No.
They all die because it's time.
No, they die because they make sure that your ass don't take nothing that you know nowhere else, and that wherever it's going to end up right there in the church.
So it's murder.
No, not only murder, but the issue is this. Remember, the object of the church is to maintain power and wealth. Power and wealth. Y'all think that y'all talking about priests not getting married because that's some religious shit? Ain't got nothing to do with religion. All of the popes and all of the early individuals got married. Everybody knew that. When Jesus met Peter, he was married. The problem is that during the marriages, when the popes became into power and those individuals died, all of the wealth went to the family.
Right.
That was the problem. And the papacy said, oh, hell no, that can't be happening no more. Because most of the families were stealing everything that was not nailed down. They were stealing everything in Europe. So if they decided that all of the booty that was retrieved from all of that theft would go back into the church, we'd be a little bit better off. And that's what they did. So their position was celibacy. Y'all thought that was about sex? No, it was about money.
Around 11th century.
That's right. And we running around talking about how much we love the damn church. Believe me, the real church is you and God. That's it. Don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted.
Amen.
But I want to stop right there just to give you an idea in regard to what and some of the things we're going to cover in the next material. But at least this gives you an idea in regard to how we should be thinking, one, about history, how we should be thinking about religious texts and information, but most of all, how we need to how can I say, bone up on our methodologies, our research, and our investigative, skills so that we can become more efficient about this information and about consuming it and about sharing it with others. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you all.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen.